can you see it? That's the trachea, folks. And right behind the trachea, and I've kind of loosened the connective tissue behind it. It was very much
I thought it was like hard,
but
it looks very flexible.
Well, of course, we've been pushing on this quite a bit, and these cats were processed. So it really does stay what's called patent, open. It really does. Those tracheal cartilages really work. Well, I'm going to just, so I kind of already loosened the connective tissue behind it, so I'm going to push it out of the way. And what's this tube right here, which, as you see, I haven't loosened the connective tissue that kind of holds up, but look at what a broad, flat tube this is. And I'll loosen those connective tissues just to get this probe all the way underneath there. And this, by the way, is the vagus nerve, folks, coming down, because it has to distribute into the abdominal cavity. But, so, okay. And this right here, ooh, I left this. Any guesses as to what this is? It would have been all on the left here, but see where this is going? And it's going kind of around behind, and it's going to dump right there at that crotch between the internal jugular and the subclavian vein.
That's the lymphatic.
It's not the left lymphatic duct. Remember, the left lymphatic duct is essentially given the name from the cisterna chyli going up and then coming around here. But what helps feed the left lymphatic duct from
The jugular.
That's the left jugular trunk, folks, right there. It's not injected with anything, so it looks just kind of dark. But the idea was and it's dark. It had lymph in it, but it turned dark because of the fixative. But in any event, so that's what that is, and I just left that. So of this trachea now, I've pretty much loosened it all the way, except for right there, because right there is where the esophagus starts. Can we see that if I try to pull up on this whole apparatus, we have the trachea anteriorly, but then what structure, what muscular tube do I have posteriorly?
Esophagus.
Is the esophagus. So I was able to incise, and I kind of garishly did not a very nice, neat dissection. You're supposed to reflect the skin and all the musculature and really show this layered. I just kind of hacked through it. But I've got the whole larynx here, folks, and if I tip this forward, I'm going to spin this around so everyone can see it. There's the esophagus. Sorry, there's the epiglottis. There's the little epiglottic cartilage right there. If you look going anteriorly, I can put my probe anteriorly, and it ends up, see, can you see it moving in the trachea? But if I go to this posterior tube, and I'm going to swing this around so you folks can actually see, and I'm sorry, Nicole,
Nope,
we can do
you're
this
fine.
later, but see posteriorly, I'm actually in this muscular tube called the esophagus. So right here, that is essentially what's called the last part of the pharynx. And remember the three parts of the pharynx? Naso, oro, and laryngo pharynx. We're right there at the laryngopharynx where we go posteriorly and we're in the esophagus. We go anteriorly and we're in the trachea. And so, let me swing that around for you folks to kind of be able to look down. There's the little epiglottic cartilage. And you can see that it's when it moves, I mean, it's really quite springy. But if we go anteriorly as that, epiglottis, I'm having to go through the glottis, and we end up in the trachea. But if we go, and you can actually even see the little opening to the esophagus. You can see the little O-shaped esophagus posteriorly. Can you see that? Just barely. I mean, and then, of course, let me show this group over here. There's the epiglottis. There's if we stay anterior, just kind of swivel around the epiglottis. We're in the trachea because we had to go through the glottis. And we could cut right there, but then the integrity kind of goes away, and it's just really nice to see this whole apparatus kind of as one, superiorly. And then, of course, what you can see is there's the thyroid cartilage, and see how glassy it appears? And you can actually feel that it's quite springy, actually. And then the cricoid cartilage, when you're gloved up and when you do this in your cats, you'll be able to feel the full round cricoid cartilage posteriorly. There's a few cricothyroid muscles and membranes that unite these structures, but beyond that you can really kind of see and where they do that, what's called a tracheotomy, when they actually when somebody's choking and you can't dislodge, That's where they go through that thyrocricoid membrane because it's small. So they go through, where's that? Let me grab this model. They go through right here, under the thyroid but above the cricoid, because then when you can put, some people have taken out, they take apart their pen, and that's a nice tube, and they'll stick a pin in there, and then the person can at least get air, and then you can breathe into that. But that'll kind of stay because of the tightness of the structures right there. I mean that's heroic measures, and I don't know when they do that. Other than military do it, but when people have what's called a tracheotomy, they've had like laryngeal cancer or something. That's where that apparatus that they can then hold their hand here, and then they can speak, and then they can breathe that way. Yeah. So in any event, so we're gonna kind of review the larynx, and you can see the trachea, and then you can come down here and follow the. Now we kind of span the gap between to the digestive system. Kind of starts, of course, with the mouth, but there's the esophagus coming down. Where should we see the esophagus going through, folks? If we pull everything we've been kind of saving so far, you can actually sort of see the last part of the esophagus underneath the pericardial cavity. You're pulling on there's the lungs and the pericardial cavity. So there's the last part of the esophagus, because it joins up with the stomach abdominally. So then in this case, then what I'd like you to do is rename all the parts of the digestive system. And in this case, I already incised along the greater curvature of the stomach. And of course, ta-da! Most cats will have a lot of worms. They'll be fixed. But so this, I didn't do anything other than incise. Most of the cats that we have. This cat, I'm surprised, doesn't have. So I'm going to just remove the little boluses of food that it had swallowed. Okay. And there'll be, sometimes there's big, huge hair balls. We find all sorts of things. Oh, here's a nice little, looks like a little insect or something. Anyway, there, and you can see where the cat had licked itself. It had a lot of hair in there. But in this case, I'm surprised. There are no, fixed. The worms will be fixed. So this cat ate right before it was euthanized, and the food was still in the stomach. Yeah, but I do this so that you can then see, because this stomach was distended. Do you see that the rugae are really quite flat? Mm-hmm. You can see the rugae, but they're really quite flattened because they were distended, and it takes energy, ATP, for the stomach to contract back up, which it didn't do. It's just it's dilated itself. So then you know the rest of the story. You should name and in the cat, remember the duodenum is quite like a block C, rather than a nice round little C. It's kind of elongated. So I want you to actually then follow for the duodenum where it folds. That's not capricious, folks. That's held by a mesentery. So then that's the full duodenum until it pinches in, and then it starts the jejunum, and you should do a run of your intestine. And now, of course, we know about the mesentery holding it. But what was the arms of the duodenum essentially filled with?
Pancreas.
The head of the pancreas. Very good. And remember, we kind of cut through the cat's pancreas, but there you can see evidence of that what's called cottage cheese textured structure. It actually does go all the way down here. So the cat's pancreas, its head is a little bit more elongated before it comes around to form the body and the tail. The humans, the head is really stays as quite, a piece that's not seemingly disconnected, because our duodenum, it doesn't have that elongation to it. So okay, so then you come along and you'll do the run of your small intestine, and then we get to this larger tube called the colon. And what was the first part of the colon called?
Cecum.
The cecum. Can we clearly see that there's an area of cecum that hangs down lower than where the ileum, the last part of the small intestine, as evidenced by this smaller diameter structure that I'm holding with the forceps, okay? And so there's the cecum, and in the cat, unfortunately, there is an ascending, transverse and descending colon, but it makes like a big comma. It's not nice and clear like for humans. It comes up on the right, does the hepatic flexion, goes over. Theirs is more like this. It just, because all these should be, this way. So it should go like this, where the cecum is here, and then it just sort of snakes around down, and so you don't have a clear sigmoid colon in the cat. It sort of lines up sooner in the midline. And you can see that there's a little bit of feculent material in there. We're not going to cut open the large intestine, so don't worry about that. And then of course, we haven't done urinary system, but to name the bladder. And otherwise, yeah, and this we can get rid of. I just wanted to let you guys, see. And once in a while, if your cat's a little female and there's a uterus in there, we can comment on that. But for today, I just want you to be able to name all those parts, identify, maybe use the little pin set that I gave you, and mark several of them and test each other. And also on one of these torso models, try to name the esophagus and the stomach and all the parts that are represented, because then